Hey, what's up everybody? It's Mark MacKinnon here. I am the game designer of Big Ice Small Mouth and Absolute Power, the tri-stat system which powers both of them. And today I wanted to go through a character creation process for Absolute Power, creating one of the characters, going through step by step. So it'll be a little bit of a longer video so you can see exactly the steps that are needed in order to create a character that you want to play. Now, while this is specific to the Absolute Power superhero role-playing game, because it is based on the tri-stat system, this character creation video can also apply the exact same way to Big Ice Small Mouth 4th Edition. So the Absolute Power core rules, book 1. So this one has everything you need to create it in the system. And then book 2 contains all the characters. And today what we're going to do is create Caliburn. Caliburn is one of the main characters from the Guard. He's been around since in publishing since the original Silver Age Sentinels 2002. And so we're going to go through a creation process for him. Now you might notice that there's a big white space here. I'm going to be putting up information and pictures and some details as we go through the character creation process. I also have some notes in front of me that I'm going to be referring to because I don't want to miss anything. This isn't the most complex character in Silver Age Sentinels, but there are a lot of steps and there's a lot of details for Caliburn. And so I want to make sure we have everything there. We don't miss anything. So I have my notes and let's dive into character creation. So the first thing is during session 0, when you sit down with everyone else in the gaming group and with the game master, you are going to determine what the power level of your game is. And that is something you always do during session 0. So you'll know what kind of character you should be creating and how many points you're going to have to create them using the Absolute Power system. So let's assume in this game that the GM decides we're going to create major level characters, and that's 150 points is what we're going to work with. That's exactly what Caliburn is statted out in book 2 on page 230. So in book 2, which looks like this, you can flip to 230 and follow along, but I've also included a copy of Caliburn's sheet in the description of this video. So you can just click on it on YouTube and you can download a PDF that'll contain Caliburn stats. If you don't have the book and you may be thinking about buying it, but you kind of want to see how you create a character first, download the Caliburn stats and follow along as we go. Okay, so let's jump into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do with the character is the concept. It's not jumping in and creating the stats and using all the numbers first. You're going to work on the concept and then the points are going to flow from the concept. So from Caliburn, my note says here that he's a Welsh detective. He's a street level protector and he's very well rounded. He's well connected and he is exceptional at fighting. Think of someone like a Daredevil or a Batman style character. He's not superpowered, but he does have some mythological inspiration with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table in his backstory. Caliburn is, certainly one of the words that'll come up in the King Arthur myth. And it's kind of an alternate word for Excalibur. And so that's why we're rolling in with that character of Caliburn. Now, while Silver Age Sentinels, when it came out in 2002, Caliburn was about 60 years old, but now in Absolute Power, 20 years later, he's over 80. So he's quite an old character, and he's going to need some assistance. His body isn't up what it used to be. Yeah, sure, maybe he's like Jack LaLanne. He's very powerful for someone of, an octogenarian, but at the same time, his body is starting to degrade, and so we're going to account for that as we go. So that is the first step you always want to do is come up with the character framework. Who's the character? What is he like or she like? And how many points are they going to work with? So 150 points. Let's jump right in for Caliburn. So the first thing we're going to work with are the stats. So because this is the tri-stat system, there are 3 stats: body, mind, and soul. So that's all things physical, all things mental, and all things spiritual and kind of willpower. So that's what body, mind, and soul are. Now, if we look in Silver Age Sentinels or Absolute Power at the benchmarks that you're going to have, a stat of 12 is considered kind of maximum human potential. This is the best of the best in the world. Not into the superpower level, but the absolute top of the world. And so because of Caliburn status, we're going to start as a baseline. I'm thinking around 12 for each of those stats, but I'm going to adjust it slightly. So his mind stat is going to be maybe a little bit lower. He's not quite top of the world, but he's amongst the top. And so rather than a 12, I want to give him an 11 mind stat. So just slightly below that maximum human potential. Meanwhile, his soul stat, I'm going to give him a 12 on that one because he is the top of the world. And then when you look at the body stat, I'd like to peg him just a little bit better. So you take the most peak perfection of humanity, and he's a little bit higher than that, but only because of the suit that he wears. So as I mentioned, he's an octogenarian, he's 80 plus years old in the absolute power setting. And so his actual body stat's going to be around a 5. So human average is considered 4. So he's still above human average. So an average human adult being a 4. He's still better than that. He's in great shape for someone of his age. But I want him to have an effective of 13 when he has his kind of a costume on. So he's dealt with his frailty, so to speak, as a superhero by building a suit that gives him an additional body stats. And so while he's not truly a 13 on his body stat, his suit is going to augment him from a 5 to a 13. And we'll talk a little bit more about the suit later, but he's going to augment that up to a 13. So if we're looking at his stats, I'm going to write down that his body is a 5, but it's a 13 because that's where I'm aiming for with the suit. And then his mind, as I mentioned, is going to be an 11, and his soul stat is 12. So that's kind of the base framework. He is an extremely well-rounded character. And boom, 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 first 3 stats are done. Now, looking at the points, we have 150 points to work with, as I mentioned. And stat points are worth 2 per stat value. And therefore, with a soul of 12, that's 24 points. So stat of 12 is 24 points. His mind of 11 is 22. And his body is 5. It actually is only 10 points associated specifically with the stat, even though I'm going to activate it up using the augmented attribute to a 13. But in terms of what his stat costs are, it's 10 because he has a body stat of 5. Okay, so let's go into what he does for combat now. As I mentioned, he's going to be a really good fighter. This is an ultimate street level fighting type. So in the absolute power, you have 2 derived values. You have your attack combat value and your defense combat value. And these are determined by taking your body plus your mind plus your soul divided by 3. So your average over your 3 stats, and that is your baseline for both your attack and defense. Now, they can be modified individually, but the baseline is body plus mind plus soul, all divided by 3, and that'll give you your attack combat value and defense combat value. So when we created the character with effective level 13 for body because of the suit, and a mind of 11 and a soul of 12, so that averages out to 12. And so the base value of attack and defense are going to be 12, which is really good. Like, this is peak humanity. But Caliburn, as a major superhero, he has gone beyond that in his training. And so I'm going to target that and think, well, what should he be at? So if he's at a 12 unmodified, I'd like to get him up to, say, a 16 in both of his attack and defense. And that's really, really good. He's not in the power level of the Sentinel or Red Phoenix, who are the 2 big fighters on his team, but they are also highly superpowered. So while he's a 150 point character, they are 275, 350 points, so much, much higher. But as a street level human fighter, he's exceptional with his training. So that's why I'm going to give him a bonus of 4 to both of his attack and defense combat value. Now what that is, those are represented through attributes. So the tri-stat system, as you know, if you're familiar with it, you're going to have your stats, which are points. You're going to have your attributes, which are rated in levels, and that is associated with points. Each attribute will have a point cost per level, so it might be level 3, and it could be 2 points per level, in which case it would be 6 points, or it could be 5 points per level, in which case it would be 15 points. So you multiply the level that they're at times the points per level to get the actual point cost. So there is an attribute called attack mastery, and there's another one called defense mastery. Both of those are going to be at level 4 to get him up to that 16. And because attack mastery and defense mastery are both 1 point per level, there's 4 points that I'm assigning to attack mastery for level 4 and 4 for defense mastery at level 4. All right, so that deals with his base core competency in combat. So let's look at the other attributes that he's going to have. So as I mentioned, he's a combat master. And so one of the things we're going to focus on are his techniques that he has. So in the base absolute power system, in any tri-stack game, you have your base combat value, and you're going to be rolling your 2 dice, 2d6 in most normal situations, adding your combat value, and you're going to be comparing that to someone who you're attacking who's going to be rolling the 2 dice and their defense combat value. Whoever gets higher wins. But there's other situations that can come into play, and that's where the attribute called combat technique happens. And so combat techniques, as most attributes, are rated in, say, 1 to 10 levels. Caliburn, being an exceptional fighter, we're going to give him a combat techniques of level 8. Now, at each level of combat technique, you get to select one particular ability. And so it's not overly important right now what I assign, but I am going to give him level 8 to indicate that he has 8 different types of abilities. The ones that we've assigned him, I'm going to give him blind fighting. So obviously, in the dark, he can fight as well. He doesn't receive those same negatives. I'm going to give him concealment, so he can hide small weapons on his body. We're going to give him critical strike, so he has an easier time doing critical hits during the game. Flanking defense, so when you're fighting multiple opponents in absolute power, the DM may assign you with disadvantages if people are flanking you. So because he has flanking defense, he's really good at keeping an eye on what's happening around him. So he has that as a combat technique. He has judge opponent. So just by looking at someone and seeing how they stand and move, he can get an idea of what their combat capabilities are. He has portable armory. So this is one of those nebulous role-playing things where he always seems to have the right combat tool for the job. And he's going to have a lot of gear later on in the game. Precise aim. So this is something that if there's penalties associated with what a character would normally do, if they're doing something a little complex during the game, well, he has a bonus with precise aim that gets rid of those penalties. And then finally, 2 weapons. So most characters can fight with 1 weapon. If you fight with 2, you have a penalty, but he doesn't have those same penalties because you have the 2-weapon combat technique. So those 8 combat techniques is level 8 in combat value, and because it's 1 point per level, that's 8 points we're going to give him to combat level, 8 points in combat technique. Now moving forward in what Caliburn, and what I'm thinking is important for him, so we've got his base fighting down, we've got his stats down, but what's really important with this character in particular are his connections. As I mentioned, he's a very well-connected person. He used to be a police detective, worked over with New Scotland Yard, and he has really good connections with both the police departments in London as well as in Empire City, where his home base is right now. That's where his group is. And then finally, he's a member of the Guard. So the Guard is the premier superhero team of the absolute power setting. These are the cream of the crop, top notch. They are given the most amount of latitude, and they are the world's greatest heroes. They give them on the level of the Justice League from DC, for example. And so connected is an attribute that you can give to your character to represent the connections he has in organizations, your character, and those connections provide advantages. Now, we don't specifically outline what those advantages are, but if you think of someone who's, maybe a police officer or a member of the military, there's a difference between someone who's a private and someone who's a general. So someone who's the president of the United States, for example. All of these different organizations, there are role-playing advantages that you get for having the connected attribute. And so I'm going to assign 3 different connected to Caliburn to represent his different connections that he has in the game. One of them is going to be for the Guard, which is his most important one. And one's going to be for the Empire City Police Department, and one's for New Scotland Yard. So he's connected to the 2 different police departments. So let's first look at the Guard. So the Guard, as I mentioned, number 1 superhero team in the world. And the way Connected works is you assign a maximum rating based on the overall influence of that particular organization. So it's ranked in levels 1 to 8. And at level 8, that is considered international authority. And so there is no level 9 or 10 for the Guard. It caps out at international. They're not a interplanetary organization. They work on Earth primarily, but they have international recognition. And so the maximum anyone could have in connected for the guard would be level 8. And that's reserved for the Sentinel. Sentinel is the leader of the guard, so he would be at level 8, where Caliburn and everyone else in the guard is just one step lower. So they're not the leader, they don't have the same speaking voice that Sentinel does, but they are really close. So instead of level 8, he'd be level 7. But here's where enhancements and limiters come in. So enhancements and limiters, what they are is there's a way you can tailor the level of an attribute by adding either some advantages or disadvantage outside the attribute itself. And these are called either enhancements if you're giving some sort of benefit to the attribute, or a limiter if you're giving a hindrance to it. So what a limiter does is, because you're giving a disadvantage, you're increasing the effective level of the attribute. So for example, let's just say something like flight. So if you have flight at level 3, but you can only skim along the ground, well, that skimming is a limiter. And because that's a limiter, rather than saying you're flying at level 3, even though you only assign level 3, your speed is level 4. It's one higher because you assigned one limiter. And the reverse is true with enhancements. This is something where the guard comes into play. So the guard, being the premier superhero team, in absolute power, we assign the guard an enhancement that's called, I think it's called significant power. And because it is significant power in the setting of absolute power, it is an enhancement that really highlights the guard as being top notch. And because of that, it has an effective one level lower. So in order to have Caliburn, we want him to be at level 7 connected for the guard. But we have to assign him level 8, and it effectively is level 7. And so that's what we're going to do for Caliburn. Caliburn has level 8 connected, effective level 7. And the guard for connected is 1 point per level, therefore that's 8 points we're assigning. Then we look at the other two. So these are two different police departments, they're about the same, and we're going to give him the authority that we would consider modest authority. So say something on the level of a deputy police chief. When Caliburn's out in the field, if he's in Empire City and he runs into beat police or cops at a scene, they will automatically defer to Caliburn and his expertise, even though he's not a member of the police department. He has the effective authority of a deputy chief of police. So yes, the chief of police can overrule Caliburn if they radio in some information that counteracts what Caliburn would like the police to do in order to apprehend a criminal, for example. He would do so, but until then, the police would recognize the authority Caliburn has because he is so respected. And modest authority is level 3. And so we're going to give him level 3 in both Empire City Police Department and level 3 at New Scotland Yard. So he has both in London and Empire City. Level 3 each, that's 3 points each. So he has 6 more points. Then in total, you got the 8 for the guard, 3 and 3, or 6 total for the other two. So he has 14 points that we're assigning to connected attribute. So that's a fair amount. He's very well connected. So let's move on to other things that he does. And in particular, what makes Caliburn good? We've dealt with his combat, we've dealt with the connections. Another thing, he's highly skilled. Now, he is not the genius of a super scientist. He's not in that level, but what he's good at, he is exceptionally good at. And in absolute power, we have an attribute called skill groups. And skill groups are broad categories that kind of indicate a competency in a particular field. And so looking at Caliburn, we're going to assign him 3 separate skill groups. So one of them is going to be the detective skill group. So this is considered there are 3 different types of skill groups. One's at 1 point per level, and those are background skills. One is 2 points per level, and those are field skills. And one at 3 points per level, and those are more... no, I forgot the term. Anyway, let me just look it up, actually. How embarrassing. So with skill groups, you either have 1 point per level, again, is background. 2 points per level is field. Oh, yeah, of course, action. And 3 points per level are action skill groups. So as a detective, he was a great detective. And we look at skill groups are ranked from level 1 to 6, where 6 being a grandmaster in a skill group. he's not a grandmaster, but he's really good. At level 5, considered a master. And I will say, yeah, he's a master detective. And so we're going to give him the detective action skill group. Level 5 indicates he's a master, and because its action groups are 3 points per level because they're so broad in their application, so that is a total of 15 points that he has associated with the detective skill group. Another one he's really known for is that's his street sense. I mean, he is connected on the streets, lurks in the alleys. Everyone knows him in Empire City. Anytime he goes to a different city, he'll understand the street culture in that area. And so once again, he's going to be a master of the street skill group. But it's not an action group. It's not 3 points per level. We consider this a field skill group. So not quite as broad. Being a street skill group is not as broad and as valuable as a detective skill group. And so it's 2 points per level. At level 5, that total of 10 points. And the final one we're going to give him, just to round out his character a little bit, and this is the adventuring skill group. So he has lots of adventuring experience, but because he spends so much time focusing on his street skills and his detective work, working with the guard, he doesn't have quite as much time to go out and do that adventuring. And so while he does have that skill group, I'm going to assign it at level 1, just to indicate a little bit of extra competency there. Because what skill groups is they add onto your stat rolls. If you're trying to accomplish something, you're going to roll your 2 6-sided dice, add on your stat, and then add on a skill group on top of there. So if it's something that applies just for adventuring, but maybe detective work or his street sense don't apply, he'll get a +1 bonus for adventuring. Adventuring is very broad, and so that's also an action skill group, 3 points per level at level 1, and so that's another 3 points. So we've spent 15 on detective, we've spent 10 on street, and another 3 on adventuring. So he's put a lot of his 150 points into skills, but that's the type of character that Caliburn, that I want to create for Caliburn, is he is a skilled, well-rounded, connected character. He's not supernatural, so he's going to be highly skilled. All right, so we've done a lot, but let's go into a few more things about Caliburn. One of them is his equipment. So the way it works in Absolute Power is you can have money, your character can have money, you can buy stuff, and that's certainly fine. It'd be difficult to restrict someone from spending their money to buy something in the game. But what we have are 2 different ways to represent things that people can have. One of them is gear, and one of them is item. Those are 2 different attributes. The item attribute are more archetypical things that you want a character to have that are really tied to that character's mythos. So think of Thor's hammer as a great example, or maybe a wizard's staff, something that is really closely tied to that character. And so whenever you put points in item, that's given point protection, we call it. So if you had points in an item and it got destroyed or stolen or taken away or something, because you've invested points in it, you'll either get it back some point in the near future in the storyline, or if it's somehow destroyed, you'll get those points back. Gear is kind of one step lower. So gear represents a lot of lower level items. These aren't really important aspects to the character, but they are things that you would consider invested with the character. So it's not just things that you'd buy, like furniture and computers, minor things. These are things that you'd think are really important that the character has. It's part of the character concept, but they're not going to be individually statted out. They're not going to be super powerful items. So if you had this super ray gun that could do all these nifty things as a character, that's probably an item. But if you had a pistol, or if you had billy clubs, or maybe some spy goggles, maybe those aren't items. Maybe those are gear. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on with Caliburn. Is we're going to give him gear, and he has a lot of gear. And we're not going to stat out every single thing for gear. I mean, just think of someone, a Batman/Daredevil type character who's going to be out there in the field. He's going to have tons of combat type equipment, whether it's grappling hooks that he can use to climb buildings. He might smoke pellets, wire cutters, lockpicks, special minor small explosives. These are all things that we wrap up into gear to say they're part of the character, but they're not so vital that we're going to give it the item status. And so with gear, given that he has access to so much, we're going to give him level 5 gear. Level 5 gear is roughly up to 50 different pieces of equipment that he's going to have. And that's a well-rounded, again, you don't need to individually determine them. He's often going to have the right piece of equipment for the job when it comes, when he's in the field. And so level 5 gear at 1 point per level is 5 points. All right. So while Caliburn is not supernatural, he does have an extreme heightened awareness. So think of someone who is out on the streets, always paying attention to what's going on. So he's highly aware. This isn't super hearing, this isn't super sight, but this is a perception-based thing where just looking around him, he's going to get a good feel for the situation. Heightened awareness is something you can give to characters to indicate that they are knowledgeable about their surroundings at all times. And that's very important for someone like Caliburn. Now, he already has really good stats, so we don't need to go crazy on the heightened awareness. Say you'd have a character who maybe is a normal human with stats of 4. To indicate a super level, like a really powerful level of heightened awareness, you may need to get him level 6, for example. But with Caliburn, because he's already so good, it's just that little bit extra. So every rank in heightened awareness gives you a +2 a bonus whenever you're making a die roll in order to something that the heightened awareness would come into play. So noticing a tripwire, noticing a secret panel, for example. And so if we give him level 3 for heightened awareness, that's a +6 bonus. He already has roughly 12s for his stats. So that's really quite good. That gives him an 18 on top of his 2 6-sided dice. So that gives him a great opportunity. Heightened awareness level 3, 1 point per level. He's 3 points. Okay, so let's go on to something else that's important for Caliburn's concept, and this is partially due to his training. Again, he is not super powered, but he has to train his mind against mental intrusions. This is something that he's been doing for decades. Meditates, learns how to use the power of his mind to protect against telepathy or mind control, other types of invasions like that. Now, interestingly, Caliburn, in the Absolute Power setting, is married to Britannia. Britannia is the UK's #1 superhero, and she is the best telepath in the whole world. So there's a really good chance that Caliburn's receives some training with Britannia against how to block telepaths or people that use mind control to invade Caliburn's mind. So we're going to give him, so let's just say level 3. That's pretty good. Like the heightened awareness with... When you have Mind Shield, that is the attribute name. You have Mind Shield, every level gives you a +2 defense against someone trying to invade a mind. And so at level 3, he's getting a +6 defense. He already has a mind stat of 11. So that's a pretty good defense for someone who's not super powered. And Mind Shield being 1 point per level, level 3, that is 3 more points. Okay. So now we're looking at one thing that isn't quite supernatural, but let's just say it's tied to his mythological origins. And so if you were to read up on Caliburn and where his origins are, it does involve the Lady of the Lake and the King Arthur mythology in there. So what he can do is he has a sixth sense about him, about truth. That is his ability. So some characters may have sixth sense for danger, so their spider sense is tingling. Other people may be able to detect magic in an area if you were a wizard. But what he does is Caliburn can detect truth. That is his thing. And whether that is looking at someone talking and reading their facial expressions and the respiration, maybe seeing how they breathe, seeing how they talk, little tics, that's what he can do, is he can read people to determine the truth about a situation. This would also help him because truth is a fairly broad category. It might also help him see through illusions, for example. If a wizard, costume wizard casts something in an area, he would have an ability to detect whether or not something is true or not. So while I don't think it fully moves into the supernatural realm, you can certainly explain it away with perception and training. That's what he's going to have. So it's just something that we're going to give him for flavor so that he's really good at detecting the truth. It's only sixth sense, and it's only level 1. Sixth sense is 1 point per level, so straightforward, 1 point. Anything in his area related to truth. I should mention about truth. So I could end it there, but one of the things we did with Caliburn is we're going to give him a limiter on his truth detection for sixth sense, and this is concentration. So this isn't something that he could just, hear someone speak something, a perp says something about a drug deal going down. He's instantly going to know that it's not the truth. He has to concentrate, and that's a limiter. So that would effectively bump his effective level up, because anytime you have a limiter, the effective level goes up. So his level 1 sixth sense would effective level 2. But we don't want level 2, because level 2 adds another sixth sense ability, and we only want him to have sixth sense to danger. So whenever you want to balance out, if you have a limiter and it's going to raise the effective level too high, what you can do is assign an enhancement called potent. And what that does is one assignment of potent gives him what we call in the game he gets an edge. I was thinking of the word. I was thinking of advantage from Dungeons and Dragons. But this is an edge. So an edge means instead of rolling 2 dice to get a value between 2 and 12, 2d6, he's going to roll 3 dice and take the best 2 results. So he'll still have a value between 2 and 12, because it is just 2 dice he's going to be using. But because whenever he has his sensing truth, he's trying to sense it, he has to concentrate, and to make up for that disadvantage of having to concentrate with a limiter, we're giving them an enhancement potent. So that means he rolls 3 dice and takes the best 2 whenever he's trying to detect something. So a plain sixth sense would be fine, but because we're giving him a special type of sixth sense that he has to concentrate, he gets an advantage of rolling an edge whenever he rolls, and gives him that extra die. Okay. There's not a lot left for Caliburn, but we're fleshing out some of the interesting aspects of his character. So, languages. Quite frankly, he speaks a decent number of languages. This is something that gives him some background knowledge and makes him a worldly person. Now, he's not an omni-god. He can't speak every language out there. But someone that comes from England area, as I said, he's Welsh. So he speaks French and Gaelic and Latin and Welsh, English, obviously, and sign language as well. So this is something that he's learned. It would help him in the field, but also as someone who works with a lot of different populations in Empire City and nationally and internationally, he's learned sign language as well. And so what features are little advantages that a character has that describe many different things. In particular, we're just focusing on languages. We roll it into the features attribute, and the way it works in features, by having 5 features, that's equivalent to level 2. It's not one feature is one level. They're in groups. So up to 5 features is a level 2. Features is 2 points per level, so that's another 2 more points he's going to have. Caliburn, as a member of the Guard, he gets draws a salary. He's a professional superhero. They're not mercenary superheroes, but the organization, obviously, superheroes do have to live, and his day job where he earns income is being a superhero, and so he does have a bit of money. We'd say he's well off. As a major superhero, he doesn't need to hoard money. They don't need unlimited funds. And the Guard, the organization that he's a member of, would have a budget, and they would provide equipment to him, for example. So, if he needs to ride around on the Guard jet, he doesn't have to buy the jet. There is a Guard jet. But in terms of his own personal wealth, we'll say, he's going to have $1 million in the bank that he can access. So he's not greedy. He's not a multi-billionaire, but he does have, let's say, $1 million in cash assets. He probably has a house and maybe has a regular car as well. So the normal things that would go along with being well off. But wealth is something that you can add to a character to add some background role-playing potential. Now, it also does indicate if you have money, if you have the wealth attribute, you could pretty well buy anything you want. But as we mentioned, buying stuff doesn't give it the point protection rule. So you can go out and buy all these guns, for example, if Caliburn was the type that wanted to use guns. But if they broke or got taken away or dropped, they'd be lost because they're purchased with money, not points under gear or items. But we wanted to give him a level of wealth to indicate, he's doing all right for himself and his family. So level 2 wealth at 3 points per level is 6 points total that he has in wealth. And that means he's well off with $1 million in the bank. So that's all the major aspects of Caliburn that we have. We've dealt with some of the really big ones, and then we worked our way down to some of the background details. But as we talked about, there was that armor, that suit of armor, the body outfit that he has. And let's deal with that a little bit. So his body armor is an item attribute. This is something that's part of Caliburn. This isn't just a spandex costume he throws on that provides real no benefits. This is something that he's custom made, custom worked with. Slipstream has helped him out as a major gadgeteer, and he's created his custom armor, his suit that he has, to be iconic of who he is. And so we're going to build his armor as an item because it has several advantages in it. And one of the things about item, the way it works for points, is just like a character when you're signing levels of attributes and points per level to give them points, you're going to add up all the points you assign to the item, in this case the armor, and then divide it by 2. You're going to cut it in half because if something's an item, it is not part of you. It is something external to you that you might not always have. So he doesn't have his armor all the time. He doesn't wear it 24/7. If there was an advantage that he'd have where this character could fly, as an example, Caliburn can't, but if a character could fly, they would pay for that item directly. But if someone had boots of flying, it would be an item and they'd get a point discount rather than paying full points. They get a 50% discount with building an item because you're not always going to have access to that item. It could get taken away and maybe you don't have it at the right situation. I mean, how many times we've seen superheroes that have these objects and they are lacking it. They left it at home or at work and they don't have access to it. And that's what item is meant to represent. And so we're going to build his armor, his suit, his costume as an item. Now, Caliburn calls it the Scabbard armor, and that kind of goes along, the fact that he's Caliburn. Caliburn is another word for Excalibur, and he's inside the scabbard. So a cute little bit of play on words that Caliburn uses. And with the Scabbard armor, we're going to just add a bunch of attributes together and then divide by 2 at the end to determine what the points are. So when you look at the armor, the very first thing that is going to be for his costume is it needs to have armor. It needs to be armored. And so his suit is not this bulky metal mecha framework. It's not a power suit like that, but it is intended to stop low-level attacks. So think of pistols, knives, swords, clubs. It's going to blunt all the attacks from those. But a high-power rifle round won't stop it completely, but it will reduce the damage. The way armor works in Absolute Power is it is a damage reduction up to the level of your armor rating. And the way damage works, we're going to be roughly, if you're looking at a weapon, you're going to take your weapon level, let's just say weapon level 3. You're going to multiply it by usually 5, which is the damage multiplier. And then you're going to add your attack combat value. So an average person having a level 3 pistol, which is a standard handgun, that'll be level 3 weapon, multiplied by 5 to get 15, add on 5 to 10 attack combat value. And so under 25 points is what a standard low-level, low-powered weapon would do, which is why we're going to peg his armor at 25 points of armor rating. So that'll give him a damage reduction of 25. Now, if he gets hit with a sniper rifle that does 40 points of damage, as an example, he is going to reduce that 40 by 25, and he'll still take 15. Like, it is going to penetrate his suit, but it is going to reduce it by 25. Every single hit, he has armor rating is applied to it if it's the type of attack that an armor rating would apply. And so that's why we're going to give him an armor rating of 5. 5 at 5 points per level at 5 armor rating per level is 25 armor rating. So that's equivalent to a level 5 armor. And at 2 points per level, that is a total of 10 points on that. Okay. The next what we're going to do is look at one other thing that, if you look at the picture of Caliburn, he has these really nice knuckles that are built into the gloves on his outfit. So this, we're going to give him a combat technique called Brutal. Now, what Brutal does is it changes an unarmed attack. Normally, unarmed attacks are level 0 weapons. They're kind of free attacks. You don't pay for them, but they're considered level 0. The Brutal combat technique makes your unarmed attack the level 1 weapon effectively. And that's what the Brutal is going to do. And so when he puts a suit on, he gets one additional combat technique called Brutal. It's 1 extra point. The suit also is going to have a bunch of nifty features, just like he has a bunch of different languages that are wrapped up into the features attribute. All of these different things that the suit can do, these little advantages, are wrapped up in the features attribute. And so the suit is going to have things like a camera, comms, GPS, heads-up display because it's a full mask that he wears, an identity verifier so no one will, if someone finds a suit for some reason and puts it on, it won't work for them. It has grapple lines built into the arms, so that's how he can climb walls. It has a radar detector, a medical kit, a tool kit. These are just little things that the suit has in addition to, of course, the armor that it provides. And so this is going to be roughly 9 features, which is equivalent to level 3 features, if there's 9 of them. So level 3 features at 3 points per level. So once again, that's going to be 3 more points in features that the armor has. Another thing interesting about the suit, we're thinking about, what would be interesting for Caliburn. I really like the fact that you picture a character jumping. I always think of the tick jumping from building to building. And I guess, someone like Caliburn as an avenger of the streets would have a great ability to jump between buildings and over obstacles and whatnot. And these would be little servos that he'd have in the legs of the suit that he wears. And this would assist him in his jumping. It's not necessary to have this. We could come up with other ways that he gets around stuff. But I think the jumping is kind of a neat thing to give to the suit. And so the way jumping works, every level increases the distance you can jump based on your regular jumping ability. And so I'd like to give Caliburn a 10 times normal jump. So if you consider what a normal human could jump, he can go 10 times that, which is very significant. And this will be whether it's a standing jump or a running long jump. And so based on this, when he has a 10 times normal, he can jump 130 meters horizontally or 16 meters straight up. And that is kind of a neat thing that Caliburn can do. And with jumping, to go 10 times, that's level 2 jumping. And jumping is 1 point per level. 2 more points put into the jumping ability. Now, as I mentioned, Caliburn does not have any kind of supernatural abilities. He has a heightened awareness, but he doesn't have heightened senses in, he can't hear, super hearing. He doesn't have supervision, but his suit does. So his suit being a technological item, it has special equipment in there, computerized equipment that can pick up sounds much better, discrimination sounds, that he can discriminate different sounds in an area. And same with vision, that he doesn't have super long vision, like he can see a quarter 10 miles away, but he could look at something and his ability to pick out different aspects and different details of it, it's like, that would be something that would be really neat for a suit to be able to do, that gives him what other people would have as a superpower. It gives him the effectiveness of a superpower, but it's all technologically based in the suit. And so we give him heightened senses attribute, and he would have both hearing and sight, and that's level 2, 2 points per level, so 2 more points put into heightened senses. The suit would help him move around really well. Now, he can't walk on water with the suit, but I think, having it so that it could help him take reduced damage if he falls, then he'd always land on his feet. That's kind of very superheroic, and I think that's a neat thing to have. And then, although he can jump with the suit, there might be times where he wants to, say, bounce between walls. And so I don't give him a full wall crawling where, he sticks to the walls and he walks up. But I think if you think of the old Wuxia films where someone's bouncing between walls as they scale something, that's kind of a neat little thing for Caliburn to have. And so we're going to give him 2 special movement attributes. One of them is wall bouncing, and one of them is cat-like. That's what we call the ability to take half damage if you're falling and always land on your feet. Special movement, rank 2, level 2, at 2 points per level, and that's a total of 2 more points. The suit, if you've seen the picture, so it has the full face mask. This is an open-suited suit, an open face suit, and is completely sealed. So it's a head-to-toe suit, and so it's going to be sealed against a lot of environmental harm. And so what it's going to have is these are resiliencies that we're going to give to Caliburn when he's in the suit. And that's the resilient attribute. And he has a lot of them. We're going to give him 8 separate resiliencies in the suit. This includes aging, and so the effects of his body degrading. This suit, it doesn't make him young, but it balances against some of his weakening body that he has, and so resilience against aging and airborne toxins, disease, intense light, intense sound. So the suit will help mitigate those that come in. High pressure, so if he's getting squished underwater, that would help him there. Lack of air, so it has oxygen tanks that he can tap into. Normally, of course, he would filter the air coming in, and it is highly filtered. This is why poisons can't get in, diseases can't get in. But if he needs to go fully self-contained oxygen, he has a tank that he could use, very small one, high pressured oxygen, but that couldn't seal him up. So he does not need external air. And so all of these different resiliencies that it gives him is a level 8 resilient. Resilient is 2 points per level, so that's a total of 16 points. So a lot of points that he put into it, but because he's in a sealed suit, he never has to worry about the external environment being too dangerous in that sense. So adding up all of these different things we've given to the Scabbard armor, it's a total of 50 points from all the advantages we've talked about. And the 50 points in the Scabbard armor is worth 25 character points that he has to spend because it's at a 50% cost. And so his Scabbard armor is 25 points. One other item that he has is a really cool motorcycle. So he calls this the Roadblade. This is a cycle he uses to get around. Again, he could buy, a really nice Harley or a Kawasaki if he wanted to, but he's custom built with other members of the Guard this Roadblade that he has. And so it's not quite as important as the Scabbard armor, but it is going to be statted out as an item because it's integral to the character. And so some of the attributes that the Roadblade would have. So it's going to have armor, of course. It's a metal unit, so it will have armor. Low-level armor, because it's not an armored vehicle. It's not an armored motorcycle, but it does have some armor protection. But because it is a cycle and he rides on top of it, the armor that we're assigning to the cycle, it does not always protect him. It gives him some protection, but this is what we call the localized limiter. And so the armor that we have for the motorcycle is localized, and because it's a limiter, the armor that we assign is going to be effectively one level higher. So we're going to assign it level 2 armor. Normally that would be an armor reduction of 10, an armor rating of 10. But because it has the localized limiter, it functions at level 3, which is an armor rating of 15. So minor attacks won't damage it. Moderate low-level attacks will just have a little bit of damage getting through. And so that gives some protection to Caliburn right as riding, but it's not a full protection like his costume has. So the armor at level 2, which is effective level 3 because of the limiter, that's worth 2 points. Something as simple as it has seating capacity for 2. So one other person, and that is, there is a capacity attribute. And for an item, you would assign capacity. So it is capacity level 1, so you can take a second person in it. And so that would be 1 point. Maximum ground speed, so it can go 500 kilometers an hour. This is not your standard, street vehicle. This is really fast. So at 500 kilometers an hour over just about any terrain, that's equivalent to ground speed level 6, and that's 6 more points. We also are going to give it a Knight Rider-esque turbo boost. So this is something where he doesn't need a ramp to leap through the air with it. Of course, he could use a ramp, but he'll have a little button that he can press, and the Roadblade will leap through the air. So this is the jumping attribute we're going to give it. But unlike the jumping attribute when you assign it to a character or the suit that gives him the jumping attribute, what it does is you take your speed that you're going at and divide it by 4, and that's what your normal jumping would be. And so because he is jumping level 1, it's 3 times that. So if he's going top speed, he can jump 375 meters with his little turbo boost without a ramp. If he had a ramp, he can go significantly higher. But this is a really neat thing to see him flying through the air on it if he had to get over a collapsed bridge or jumping over a warehouse or something like that. So it has jumping. And then we're going to round it out with numerous other more technological features that a vehicle could have, something that is using in the streets for reconnaissance and moving along. And so some of the features we're going to give him, he has fast acceleration, so It's super fast to accelerate rather than a slow uptake. It has a GPS. It's highly maneuverable. It has an identity verifier like his suit that you can't use the Roadblade unless you're verified for it. And it has a modern vehicle tech suite, which is the kind of the wrap all we were around that we use for modern vehicles. So it'll have like a radio and probably an MP3 player, lights, a horn, all the standard things in a modern vehicle that we have. So we're going to give it features level 2, which is 2 points. And so all of those things, not nearly as many as the Scabbard armor has. So that's a total of 14 points. And because it's an item, it's half that value. So it costs him 7 character points to have the Roadblade as an item. So if we look at all the character we've done so far, he had 56 points in stats for Body, Mind, and Soul. Quickly, let me just go back to that. That reminded me. So remember we talked about how the suit is going to augment him. So I didn't mention that there's an attribute called augment, and so he is augment body at 8 levels. This adds directly to his body stat whenever he is wearing it. That's why the Roadblade is as many points as it is. I did forget to mention that he has augment. And so when you look at the total, he has 56 points in stats. That does not include the +8 body stat. That's rolled into the Scabbard. 56 in stats and 110 points in attributes, which includes the augmented and the Scabbard and the Roadblade and all the other attributes together. So that's a total of 166 points. Now, we mentioned that we're creating a 150-point character, and we've overspent by 16 points. So I could go back to the character and start chopping 16 points somewhere from it, but there's another way that you can do it. If you want to keep the integrity of that vision, but still be within your point value, and that is called defects. So defects think of them as negative attributes. These are disadvantages you'd assign to your character to return points to them. And so Caliburn is going to have, as most superheroes and supervillains will have, defects. He's going to have a number of defects that are going to return points. So when we're going through it, some of the things, the most important thing for him is going to be a secret identity. So no one knows that Caliburn is actually Adam Sinclair. I shouldn't say no one, because obviously his trusted teammate does, his wife, his family. There are some people that have figured it out, for example, but most of the world thinks him as Caliburn, and the fact that there's this other person named Adam Sinclair, which is truly who Caliburn is, most people don't know that. And like many superheroes, it keeps a secret identity. This is something that there are consequences if it was to come out. He has a lot of people after Caliburn. He made a lot of enemies, and if everyone knew who he was, then it would be a much more difficult life with that. And so with secret identity, we're going to give it a rank 2, which would be moderate consequences of the secret coming out. And rank 2 of the secret identity at negative 2 points per rank. So he returns 4 points because the secret identity is important for him to keep. So that's 4 points returned. Next is we're going to look at his primary nemesis. So while I mentioned many people dislike Caliburn, the villains, because of what he does and impacts their business and their super villainous plots, but there's one person that stands out, and this is Yanis. So Yanis is our main psychotic but genius psychotic killer and a major villain. He's part of the White Rooks, which is, just like the Guard is the number 1 superhero team in the world, the White Rooks is the number 1 villain team in the world. And so Yanis is part of the White Rooks, and he is a nemesis for Caliburn. In fact, Caliburn exists because Yanis killed Caliburn's first love. Before, when he was just a detective. And the reason why Adam Sinclair took on the Caliburn role is because of the actions of Yanis. And so Yanis, as the nemesis, we're going to give him the highest rank. So he's a rank 3 nemesis. He's constantly interfering in what Caliburn does. And a nemesis at 3 ranks, at negative 1 point per rank. So that returns 3 points back to Caliburn for having Yanis as a major nemesis. One of the things that happened early on during these initial confrontations with Yanis is a hot fire poker ended up giving him massive scarring on his face. And so this actually results in 2 separate defects that Caliburn has. One of them is marked. So marked is something, if something has a very distinguishing feature, this would come into play. And while obviously when he's in this Caliburn outfit, you can't see his face, and he has a secret identity, so you wouldn't know that. But Adam Sinclair has this massive Scabbard on his face from a brutal attack with a fire poker that Yanis gave him. And so that is considered 2 ranks of the mark defect, and at -1 point per rank, so that returns 2 more points to him. But in addition, he has another defect called unappealing. And unappealing is, it's a little ugly and difficult to work with. In our society, you'd turn away if you saw someone with some pretty hideous scars, and that's what happens with Adam when people see him without his mask on. And so, but it's a minor disadvantage. And you'd think, well, aren't they the same thing? But they're not. Someone could have a marked so that they stand out. For example, if you had extreme tattoos and very, very distinguishing tattoos, or a hair color and design, maybe a bright color and in an odd pattern, that would be marked but isn't necessarily unappealing. At the same time, someone may have something that's not marked, they don't stand out, but they are still unappealing. For example, someone had a very strong body odor, like a scent that they gave off. Maybe it's something within their origin story that it might not mark them, but it could be unappealing. But with Caliburn in particular, he has them both. It's, people will turn away because it's not pleasant to look at, and it is also marksome. So with the unappealing, it's only rank 1 at -1 rank per level, so that gives him another -1 point back. And when I mentioned that Caliburn has lots of enemies, while Yanis is his #1 nemesis, Caliburn is wanted by many organized crime syndicates, whether it's in London or Empire City. He's messed up a lot of business for a lot of master criminals, and so he has a price on his head. So we're going to give him the wanted defect. We're going to give him a moderate disadvantage with it, so 2 ranks rather than 3 or 1. 1 wouldn't be very powerful, and 3 would be maybe a little too wanted. And so he's moderately wanted at 2 ranks and at -2 points per rank. That's another -4 points back. And then finally, Caliburn is famous worldwide. Like, he is part of the guard. Everyone knows him. And he's hounded constantly by the media, by adoring fans, for example. Like, he's a real superstar. And this makes it difficult for, he just can't, when he's finished work for the day at the guard, he can't just take off his mask and get in his car, because there's probably people following him, wanting to meet with him. And so being hounded is a disadvantage for keeping his secret identity and for doing his duties. And sometimes these people that are hounding him, whether it's a reporter looking for a big scoop or a fan looking for an autograph, they're going to be put in harm's way sometimes. And so that is definitely a disadvantage for him. So he's going to have the hounded. He's famous as Caliburn. He's going to have that defect at 1 rank, which is -2 points. So when we look at all those defects, when we add them all together, it's -16 points. And lo and behold, Caliburn, when you take the 166 points and subtract 16, he's now a 150-point character. And we're almost done. We've now designed the character as it is, and we filled in all the attributes, all the stats, and all the defects to balance it out, but there's still some derived values that need to be calculated. And derived values are things that are based on your stats, but they round out your character. I already mentioned 2 of them. Combat value. So your attack combat value and defense combat value. So both of those, as I mentioned earlier, they would be at a 12 because of when he's in his armor, they would be at a 12 as the base. But then because he had 4 levels of attack combat mastery and 4 levels of defense combat mastery, so that 12 goes to a 16 for both of them. Now that's when he's fighting or defending in his Scabbard armor. But if he doesn't have it, he will still have a combat value, both attack and defense. But because his body stat isn't a 13, because it's been augmented in his suit, but it's only a 5, that modifies the attack and defense down both by 4. So rather than being a 12, you'd actually bring it down by 4 because he's not in the suit. And so it would be 4 less, so that would be 8 and 8. In there. So as an 80-year-old, he's still a force to be reckoned with, but he's much more powerful as a combatant when he's in a suit. So that's the attack combat value and defense combat value. There's also health points. So health points, the way it works is it's going to be your body plus your soul stats times 5. Now this gives me an opportunity to go back at the augmented and take a look at that and say, well, the way I want to augment it is the body stat augmentation from the body, so it gives him a higher body, doesn't affect his health points. Like, he's not physically tougher because the body, the suit helps support his body. So the augmentation does not assist in his health points. And so we would use his base body stat of 5 plus his soul stat, add them together, multiply by 5, so he'd have 85 health points. And then we look at the energy points, which may not come into play for Caliburn. He doesn't have anything based on energy, but every character would have energy points, whether you use them or not. It's just a derived value, and that is your mind plus soul and multiplied by 5. And so he has an energy points of 115. He has 12 plus the 11 plus 12 multiplied by 5. So 115. And then the final thing is the damage multiplier. So damage multiplier, as I mentioned, everyone has a 5 damage multiplier unless it's modified in combat. Some people will have higher or lower, but we didn't mess with Caliburn's and any of the attributes or defects. We didn't change it. So his base damage multiplier is still 5, which means anytime he's in combat, he'd take his weapon level, multiply it by 5, which is his damage multiplier, and that'll give his base damage, and then he adds on his attack combat value onto that. So if he's using, batons that he often likes using, they're only weapon level 2. So weapon level 2 times 5 damage multiplier equals 10 points, plus his attack combat value, which I already mentioned when it's in the suit, it's 16. So it would end up doing 26 points of damage every time he's attacking with his batons. So that's it. This is a long video, but I want to make sure I walk through the whole process of creating a character in Absolute Power, or BESM, or the Tri-Stat system, and how to create a character. So you start with your concept in your session 0 to make sure you understand how many points you have working with, what are the parameters of the character, are there any kind of benchmarks, and then once you have your framework that you're working on for how powerful he is, then you start thinking about the concept of the character. Who is the character? Who are they? Do they have certain things that are going to flag on when you're creating the character? Certain elements that are going to come up because of the background. Once you've decided on the background, then you're going to build it out based on your background concept that you have, creating your stats and assigning your body, mind, and soul. You're going to assign attributes. You're going to assign defects if you need to adjust the points down. And then you're going to calculate your derived values. And once you finish all that, your character is done. Now, it can be a long process if you want to be highly detailed. We created a 150-point character. If you're creating a 350-point character like Sentinel, who has a lot more abilities, that would take a little bit longer. But if you're creating a character for, say, BESM, and it's just like a regular high school game that you're running, kind of a slice of life, you might only be 25, 30, 40 points for a character like that. And creating a normal, unpowered high schooler would be a much simpler job. But I wanted to walk through Caliburn just so you can kind of see what the entire process was. You can download the Caliburn's stat sheet, as I mentioned, in YouTube in the links. Take a look at what we did, walk through the video, and you can see how we create a character in Absolute Power from start to finish. So I hope this has been somewhat instructional. Hope it's given you a little bit of guidance for creating your own characters. If you have any questions, post them in the comments below. Drop us a note on any of our socials. We're at Discami, or drop us an email, info@discami.ca. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and happy time being a superhero. Bye-bye.